welcome. Dr. Andy Rosenfarb here with AccuVision Acupuncture. Today we're going to talk about something new. It's a new conversation relevant to anybody, of course, with eye issues. So if you've been following me for a while, you know that there are three main factors that I talk about when it comes to progressive vision loss, okay? There is the inflammation, there is blood flow, and there's oxidative stress. For years, we've been talking about those being the three main driving factors for accelerating progressive vision loss. Now, we found two more. There's two more that I've come up with over the last couple months. And the one we're going to talk about today is cell stress and how it can affect your vision. So the next few sessions that we're going to put together for you inside these live videos are going to really focus on cell stress. What is cell stress? How does it relate to your vision? And what you can do to help manage cell stress. So first we got to talk about what it is, how it affects your vision, and then what you could do about it. So this section that we're going to go over today is going to talk about simply what is cell stress. Glad you asked. So cell stress refers to a state in which the cells experience various unfavorable conditions or stimuli that disrupt their normal functioning in homeostasis. What does that mean? It just means there are stress factors that stress them out so they can't do their job. They become overwhelmed, just like us, right? If there's too many things on our plate or there's too many things that we need to do, our to-do list is overwhelmed, or we have other life stress, our functional capacity is disrupted, right? We become overwhelmed, become stressed, we don't sleep, we don't eat right. And then there's certainly effects as a result of that. So remember, each cell in our body is a little miniature version of us. So as we can become overwhelmed from stress factors, either internal, emotional, biological, metabolic, or external factors. So again, cell stress rather can come from either internal sources or external sources. Cells are highly sensitive to changes in their environment, the internal environment, of course. And when exposed to these stress factors, they can activate specific cellular responses so that they can cope and adapt to the challenging conditions. So again, that pretty much means that when presented with stress, there are going to be some energetic biochemical responses to that stress so that the cells can cope better and deal with the stress. It's like a coping mechanism. So cell stress can arise from various sources, including, as we said, physical, chemical, energetic, electrical, or biological, all right, internal and external. We found that there are 8 main cell stress factors. There's a lot. This is like a whole conversation of epigenetics. But if we had to narrow it down, we narrowed it down to 8 main types of cell stress that I want to go over with you guys right now. So number one is, we're all very familiar with, oxidative stress. Okay, so again, we've talked at length about oxidative stress. If you guys want to learn more about that, go back and watch some of my other videos on oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species, and free radical damage. And basically, oxidative stress occurs when cells are exposed to an excessive amount or quantity of reactive oxygen species, ROS. These molecules are highly reactive and can cause damage to cellular components like proteins, lipids, and even the DNA. Oxidative stress is implicated in aging, accelerated aging, and various diseases like vision loss with a lot of these progressive conditions like macular degeneration, glaucoma, RP, eye strokes, optic nerve atrophy, optic neuritis, so on and so forth. So oxidative stress, as we know, is a major factor in terms of putting stress on the cells. And of course, we have a lot of ways to manage and reduce the overload or burden, toxic burden of oxidative stress or free radicals on the body, specifically on the cells. So that's number one. The second main factor I want to talk about is inflammation, or what we call heat shock stress, all right? Stress occurring from too much heat surrounding the cells or in the environment. So the cells can experience heat shock stress when they're exposed to elevated temperatures, right? Makes sense. So this stress can lead to the misfolding of proteins and disruption of cellular structures, right? So it causes breakdown, structural and functional breakdown when there's too much heat and too much inflammation. The cells respond to this inflammatory process or heat shock by producing a family of proteins called heat shock proteins. Pretty interesting, which help refold damaged proteins and restore normal cellular functions. So these inflammatory processes called this heat shock stress, where as a result of that, the body will try to cope with that by producing and releasing proteins called heat shock proteins. Again, are going to help mitigate the damage caused by inflammation, which is primarily where the damage to the proteins are really under attack over there. So the body will naturally do that, but we can use things like anti-inflammatories, things like CBD, turmeric, anti-inflammatory diet, reducing junk food, and so on and so forth, all the things, managing infections in our body, whether it's bacterial or viral, things that create prolonged inflammatory processes in the body. Sometimes if they're autoimmune, we can use things like vitamin D to help reduce the stress, but we'll get into a full spectrum of different modalities that we can do based on these specific stress factors. So that's number two. Number two is the inflammatory heat shock stress. The third is a little bit more cellular, and it's called endoplasmic reticulum stress. Now, you can remember from 7th grade biology that the endoplasmic reticulum, or the ER, is responsible for protein folding and lipid metabolism, right? Lipid is fat metabolism, and this protein folding, and if you actually Google it and you look up, and you'll see that these structures are all folded in, and disruption of this protein folding process or an overload of unfolded proteins within the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, can lead to ER stress, endoplasmic reticulum stress. So that stress can trigger the unfolded protein response, is a cellular mechanism aimed for restoring endoplasmic reticulum function, which again is designed to have this proper, appropriate protein folding, right? Which is very, very important for them to function. When they're not folded, they're not usable for the body. So the ER really helps with that process. Very, very important. So when the ER gets stressed out, it doesn't properly fold these proteins and metabolize lipids, and we have problems. Especially if you think of things like macular degeneration, where we have a hyperproduction of drusen, which is an accumulation of fat. It can have a lot to do with endoplasmic reticulum stress, where we are having problems with lipid or fat metabolism. And the result with that would be a buildup of drusen, macular drusen, and macular degeneration, age-related and or Stargardt's. So that's number three. The fourth form of stress is nutrient stress, okay? Cells, of course, require a balanced supply of nutrients and vitamins and nutrients and substances to function properly. A lack of essential nutrients or imbalance of nutrition availability due to various factors can lead to nutritional stress, either too much junk food, too much toxicity in the body, and or not enough good, healthy, vital nutrients for the body. And that will ultimately affect the cell's growth, the metabolism, and its overall health and function. So nutrition is really important. We go very, very specific into that, but just know that is, of course, improper nutrition can for sure cause stress on these cells of your eyes. DNA damage and what's called genotoxic stress. That's kind of maybe a new idea or a new conversation for a lot of you guys. But DNA damage and genotoxic stress is the number 5 factor for cellular stress. Now, DNA can be damaged by various factors. We talked a lot about inflammation and oxidative stress being 2 main factors that can drive DNA damage, okay? Also things like radiation, blue light, UVA, chemo radiation for cancer treatments, X-rays, microwaves, any form of radiation that's detrimental to the body. Certain chemicals, right? Environmental chemicals, pollution, pharmaceuticals, recreational drugs, GMOs, pesticides, herbicides, anything that is kind of considered a toxin to our body. Certainly heavy metals can be involved is that as well, and they cause errors during DNA replication. All right, having these these toxins in the body. They cause damage, and then once we have the toxins, it'll cause damage to the DNA, and then when they go to replicate, they replicate in a faulty way, and we have a whole cascade of poor gene signaling, and then gene expression, and then disease production. So this genotoxic stress specifically refers to the stress response triggered by the DNA damage, which can lead to mutations such as things like RP, Usher's, Stargardt's, or any of the genetic type of conditions, and potentially even cancer in some cases, like eye cancer, whether it's benign or metastatic. So if they're not properly repaired. So DNA is a really, really important thing. And of course, there's a lot of gene therapy going on around this, but DNA damage and genotoxic stress are two really, really, really important stress factors. And again, the whole, spectrum of factors that can cause DNA damage and genotoxic stress are extensive and it's almost endless, like anything that can stress out our body. So again, that's more of like an epigenetic conversation, and it basically talks about the seemingly endless combination of different stress factors on the body from internally, environmentally, that can just put stress on the body and ultimately affect the DNA. So that's number 5. Number 6 is called hypoxic stress. Okay, what's hypoxic? Hypoxia is, you guys probably know, and I've talked about this a lot, occurs when cells are exposed to too low levels of oxygen, right? It's an impairment of cellular respiration. The cells start to suffocate because they can't breathe. This can happen in various situations, such as high altitudes or certain disease where the blood vessels swell or constrict, or they become obstructed, or there's ischemia. So anything that's going to impact blood flow, either an occlusion, an ischemia, high altitude, low oxygen, again, vasoconstriction, swelling of the blood vessels, any of these factors. And the cells respond to hypoxic stress by activating pathways to help them adapt to the oxygen flow conditions, or the reduced oxygen flow conditions, rather. So again, those of you guys who have heard me talk about things like wet macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy and retinal bleeding, and this growth of VEGF, or new blood vessels that grow to what, and why does that happen? It happens again because the cell is dealing with hypoxia, especially the macular cells in the retina. So because of the hypoxia or too low oxygen, the body will grow new blood vessels to try to increase the oxygenation of the macular and retinal tissue. As a result of that, these new blood vessels are very weak and fragile as opposed to the original primary blood vessels, and they're very susceptible to rupturing and bleeding, which is where we get things like wet macular degeneration, retinal bleeding, hemorrhages sometimes, and certainly bleeding in diabetic retinopathy. So hypoxic low oxygen stress is really important. And again, it's right up there with the nutrition stress or nutrient stress. If the cells can't eat and they can't breathe, they can't metabolize, they can't respirate, it's no bueno. So how long can we live without oxygen? We talked about that last week when we talked about circulation. Not very long, and that same factor goes for our cells. Whether the oxygen's cut off or just reduced significantly, that's going to cause a lot of problems for the retinal cells, the optic nerve cells, and the brain cells, and cause not only an onset of some of these ophthalmic conditions, but also a progressive accelerated state of vision loss. So it's really important to manage that. And of course, we use things like, all of our therapies to help improve blood flow, but for hypoxia specifically, treatments like hyperbaric and EWAT, exercise with oxygen therapy, are going to be super, super helpful for that. So that's number 6, hypoxic stress. Number 7 is mechanical stress. Okay, mechanical stress is pretty straightforward, where cells can experience stress from physical forces such as a stretching or compression of the muscles around the eye, or a physical shaping, either due to a trauma or maybe a genetic or developmental abnormality. Maybe that happened in utero, or maybe postpartum as we were aging or developing, or maybe just an accident and that happened in life, where mechanical stress can influence cell behavior and signaling, and it plays a role in processes like tissue development and wound healing. So a lot of mechanical stress can inhibit the repair, recovery, and regeneration of cells, basically creating blocks in the flow of oxygen, nutrients, and cellular metabolites, getting the nutrients and oxygen we need to the cells, and impairing the carbon dioxide and the toxic elimination of cells from the nerve and retinal cells. So that's mechanical stress. It means something mechanically is going on with the body. That's in the way of allowing these retinal cells, optic nerve cells, the whole visual pathway to function, or in this case, it's going to malfunction. So that's mechanical stress. The last factor I want to talk about is chemical stress. All right. There's also, I'm not going to get too much into radiation stress, which is, we talked a lot about. There's also there's radiation stress, which is UV radiation, blue light. That is like the 9th and 10th stress, but we've talked so much about that. Just kind of dog ear that, because we're going to talk more about that later. But just keep in mind too that certainly UV radiation and blue light are the top two radiations. Also, electromagnetic frequencies that come off screens can be stressful for some, but those are the main radiation stresses that we have to deal with. Getting back to chemical stress. So chemical stress is exposure to harmful chemical toxins that can lead to cellular stress and degeneration, even death. For example, exposure to heavy metals, pollutants, again, pesticides, herbicides, drugs, whether it's pharmaceutical, recreational, certainly smoking, vaping, junk food, chemicals in our food, preservatives, anything chemical that can mess up our bodies that's not useful or helpful for our body can lead to chemical stress response. So those are our 8 main factors, or 9. Actually, we're getting into, I talked about the radiation stress. And cells have evolved various mechanisms to sense and deal with this stress, how they respond to it, which may involve activating specific signaling pathways, altering gene expression, and activating stress response proteins. Okay? The response to stress can vary depending on the type and intensity of the stress factor and the type of cell involved, right? So retinal cells may respond differently to neuromuscular cells, and different than brain cells, and different to the vascular cells, and different, which can be also different response to, say, maybe the anterior compartment, if you're dealing with like dry eye or dealing with uveitis, or maybe cataracts or something like that. So different parts of the eye and different parts of the visual system, and even furthermore, different parts of the whole body, different cell structures, will respond differently to different types of cell stress, right? That should make sense. So in some cases, if cells are unable to cope with prolonged or severe stress, it can lead to cell death, right? We can go to cell dormancy, then we can go to cell damage, and cell dysfunction, ultimately cell death. And we know that once nerve cells are gone, they're gone, including the retinal cells, the macular cells, the rods and cones photoreceptors, also the optic nerve, and the cells of the brain, the visual cortex. Once those nerve cells are gone, they are gone. That doesn't mean we can help with the neuroplasticity and help do the best we can with whatever residual visual capacity we have. But as far as nerve cells, once they're gone, which is why we focus so strongly on preservation, because of course preservation is a much easier strategy than resurrection of dead tissue, which of course we can't do. So AccuVision, of course, our in-office and at-home treatments directly manage these factors that drive cell stress. Some of our supplements, some of our therapies, our HBOT or H2 or ACS, our supplements. So the outcome of that would be so the cells can, of course, function in a healthier way so they don't die and they don't get sick, and they can actually do what they need to do, which is help you see. So if you identifying with any of these and you're kind of stuck and you think that any of these stress factors kind of ring true for you or seem suspicious, and you're looking for help with that, reach out to us. We have a lot of programs. We have, if you want to kind of DIY, do it yourself, you can go to our website. You can order some supplements. You can consider ACS. If you want a little bit more help, you can consider booking a telehealth consultation with me. We do offer those. Or you may even want to take a trip to our clinic and come do a real deep dive and find out what's going on specifically with your condition, get some treatment, and then we can send you home with some strategies and some other methods to help you can manage these cell stress factors at home that can affect your vision. So again, my name is Dr. Andy Rosenfarb with AccuVision, where your vision is our mission. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.